Imagine this: you're an ordinary person, just like everyone else. You have a family, aspirations, and a moral compass that guides your understanding of right and wrong. And yet, one day, you find yourself in a room, given a simple directive. Before you sits a stranger, their hands bound. A man in a lab coat tells you to press a button. It's just an experiment, he assures you. You press the button. The person flinches, electricity visibly surging through their body. You hesitate. Continue, the authority figure insists. Now pause. What would you do? This isn't fiction. This is the real-life Milgram experiment, one of the most unsettling psychological studies ever conducted. In this experiment, ordinary people, teachers, office workers, parents, were instructed to administer what they believed were dangerous electric shocks to strangers. Alarmingly, over 65% of participants continued delivering shocks up to the highest voltage, despite hearing the other person scream in agony. It was only an experiment. But what happens when obedience plays out in real life? Take a step back to 1944, a quiet town in Europe. A soldier, once a kind-hearted man, a father, receives an order. He hesitates for a moment, rifle in hand. Before him stand unarmed civilians, eyes filled with fear. His hands tremble. Then, he hears the command again. Do your duty. And so, he pulls the trigger. This man wasn't a monster. He was, in many ways, just like you, just like me. So how does an ordinary person become capable of such atrocities? We often comfort ourselves with the belief that only evil people commit evil acts, that only the heartless, the sociopaths, the morally bankrupt are capable of true cruelty. But what if the truth is more disturbing? What if, under the right conditions, you could too? Psychology has repeatedly demonstrated that the most frightening aspect of human nature is not that evil exists, it's that it resides in all of us. History proves this time and again. The Holocaust, the Rwandan Genocide, Abu Ghraib, moments where ordinary individuals became instruments of unimaginable cruelty. Not because they were inherently evil, but because they were pulled into a hidden process, a psychological transformation that gradually erodes morality, distorts perception, and turns decent people into perpetrators. And the most terrifying part? You likely wouldn't even realize it's happening. This transformation isn't immediate. It's a slow, almost imperceptible descent. A series of minor, seemingly harmless steps. It begins with small moral compromises, tiny concessions, a little justification here, a bit of obedience there. And before long, you've crossed a line you once believed you'd never approach. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a warning. Because this process is unfolding around us every day, in workplaces, politics, online discourse, and personal relationships. If we fail to recognize it, we risk becoming complicit ourselves. In the next few minutes, we'll explore how this transformation occurs, the 5 psychological forces that silently reshape a person's ethics. Most importantly, you'll learn how to protect yourself from falling into this trap. Because if history has taught us anything, it's this. The moment you say, "I would never do that," is the moment you're most at risk. The corruption cycle. How good people become monsters. Most people believe evil is a conscious choice, that monstrous acts stem only from monstrous people. But history tells a different, more unsettling story. Under the right circumstances, anyone can be led down a path of destruction. Not because they choose to abandon their morals, but because they are gradually pulled into a psychological current they don't even realize exists. This descent follows a predictable, repeatable pattern, one that has recurred across wars, governments, and societies. I call it the corruption cycle, a 5-stage transformation that explains how ordinary people can become capable of extraordinary cruelty. Stage 1. Moral erosion, the first small step. No one leaps into darkness. The descent always begins with minor compromises, small ethical violations that feel trivial at first. A white lie, a small betrayal, bending one's values just this once for a seemingly justifiable cause. But here's the danger. Each step lowers the threshold for the next. What was once unthinkable slowly becomes acceptable. The foundation of one's moral compass begins to crack, not through one major decision, but through many small ones. Stage 2. Obedience to authority, the illusion of duty. The infamous Milgram experiment proved something deeply unsettling. Ordinary people will inflict harm on others simply because an authority figure tells them to. History has reinforced this truth, from Nazi soldiers to corporate employees carrying out unethical directives. The common refrain, "I was just doing my job." This obedience masks personal responsibility, allowing harmful behavior to flourish under the guise of duty. When we surrender our judgment to authority, we enable evil without intending to. Stage 3. Group Identity. The us versus them trap. Humans are social beings. We crave belonging. But this powerful instinct leaves us vulnerable to dangerous manipulation. When we begin to view ourselves as part of a group, we inevitably start seeing others as outsiders, less familiar, less human. This is where dehumanization begins. From political factions to ethnic conflicts, the moment we define someone as other, compassion fades and cruelty becomes easier to justify. Stage 4. Self-justification and moral licensing. The mind's sleight of hand. No one wants to see themselves as the villain. So when we act in ways that conflict with our values, our minds rewrite the story. I had no choice. It was for the greater good. This cognitive dissonance gives rise to rationalization. Once we excuse an unethical act because we see ourselves as good, we're more likely to repeat it. Bit by bit, the boundaries erode. Stage 5. Dehumanization. The point of no return. This is the final and most devastating stage, when individuals, groups, or entire societies strip others of their humanity. Once a person is no longer seen as fully human, moral restraint vanishes. Cruelty, violence, and oppression become not just tolerable, but often encouraged. This stage has fueled history's darkest moments: genocide, war crimes, systemic hate, and continues to appear today in online harassment, institutional discrimination, and beyond. The corruption cycle is not confined to history books. It is alive, recurring, and often invisible. And it does not only affect others. It can affect any of us. Understanding this cycle is the first step to resisting it. In the sections that follow, we will explore each stage in greater detail, starting with the silent and insidious danger of moral erosion. Because evil rarely announces itself. It doesn't begin with brutality. It begins quietly, with a small, seemingly harmless choice. A choice that makes the next one easier. And once you take that first step, the descent begins. Throughout history, some of humanity's darkest chapters, from genocide and slavery to war crimes and systemic oppression, have been fueled by a common psychological process: dehumanization. This insidious mindset begins with a simple shift in perception, seeing others not as individuals, but as threats, labels, or enemies. When people begin to view a group as fundamentally different or less human, empathy disappears, and cruelty becomes justifiable. This phenomenon doesn't require an explicit ideology or deep-rooted hatred. People can discriminate against an entirely arbitrary group, and when that group is defined by race, religion, nationality, or ideology, the effects are exponentially more severe. History has repeatedly shown how societies justify violence by framing it as necessary, righteous, or defensive. The first step in this descent is always psychological, stripping away the humanity of the other. The dehumanization process, a historical pattern. The formula is tragically familiar. Labeling. Oppressors reduce people to subhuman terms. Nazis called Jews rats, Rwandan Hutus referred to Tutsis as cockroaches, and American slavers labeled Africans as savages or property. Scapegoating. Propaganda blames these groups for economic, social, or political problems, creating a false sense of threat. Erasure of individuality. People cease to see others as individuals and instead perceive them as faceless members of a threatening group. Justification of violence. Once a group is viewed as less than human, acts of cruelty are not only tolerated, they are encouraged. This progression is evident in every major atrocity in human history. And contrary to popular belief, these acts are not typically carried out by sadists or psychopaths, but by ordinary individuals who have internalized the belief that their actions serve a greater good. During the Holocaust, millions of German citizens supported or tolerated extermination policies not out of inherent evil, but out of loyalty, fear, or belief in self-preservation. In the Rwandan Genocide, Nearly 800,000 people were slaughtered in just 100 days, many at the hands of neighbors and civilians. The Stanford prison experiment demonstrated that even in a simulated environment, average individuals quickly adopted abusive behavior once assigned power over others. In all cases, a common thread emerges. The moment individuals stop seeing others as fully human, moral boundaries dissolve. Modern-day dehumanization, not a relic of the past. Dehumanization is not confined to the history books. It's alive today in more subtle yet dangerous forms. Social media and digital communication have exacerbated the problem by removing the human face from our interactions. Political opponents are no longer viewed as people with differing views, but as traitors or enemies. Outrage culture, online harassment, and cancel mobs thrive in environments where empathy has been stripped away. Algorithms and echo chambers reinforce division, rewarding moral outrage and vilifying dissent. The psychological groundwork is the same. Once a person or group is labeled as the other, we disengage from their humanity. From there, it becomes easier to justify exclusion, punishment, and even violence. The role of self-justification. How good people do harm. Behind acts of cruelty often lies another powerful psychological mechanism, self-justification. When individuals engage in behavior that contradicts their values, the resulting cognitive dissonance creates discomfort. Rather than admit wrongdoing, most people unconsciously rewrite their reality to preserve their self-image. This is why people who commit harmful acts often genuinely believe they are still good. They justify unethical behavior as necessary, deserved, or insignificant. A person cheats but says, "I studied hard, I deserve this." A worker mistreats a colleague and rationalizes it, "They had it coming." A soldier commits atrocities but frames them as defensive actions, "We were protecting ourselves." Over time, each justification pushes individuals further from their original moral compass. The danger lies not in isolated actions, but in the gradual erosion of conscience. This phenomenon, known as moral licensing, is particularly dangerous in ideological or political contexts. When individuals believe their cause is righteous, they may feel entitled to commit harm in its name. History offers sobering examples. Religious wars fought in the name of salvation. Political purges justified as cleansing society. Free speech crushed under the guise of national security. Each instance shows how easy it is for power and ideology to corrupt moral judgment when self-justification is left unchecked. The human instinct behind the descent into evil. What if these tendencies, obedience to authority, group loyalty, self-justification, and dehumanization, are not simply moral failings, but deep-rooted evolutionary instincts? At their core, these behaviors evolved to help humans survive. Tribalism ensured safety through group belonging. Obedience to leaders increased group cohesion. Dehumanization dulled empathy toward perceived threats. Self-justification helped individuals maintain mental stability. These traits are not inherently evil. They are part of the human condition. But in modern society, they are easily hijacked by propaganda, ideology, or social pressure. This is why the atrocities of the past continue to repeat. And it's why the assumption, "I would never do something like that," is among the most dangerous beliefs a person can hold. Resisting the descent, a conscious moral effort. No one is immune to the psychological forces that drive dehumanization and moral decay. However, we are not helpless. The path to resistance lies in cultivating radical self-awareness and conscious moral reflection. Here's how. Daily self-reflection. Ask yourself, if someone else did what I just did, would I still consider it acceptable? This helps uncover blind spots in personal morality. Question authority. Just because someone in power issues a directive doesn't mean it's right. Ask, would I still follow this order if no one was watching? Break the tribalism mindset. Refuse to accept us versus them thinking. Each time a group is labeled as evil or inferior, challenge that narrative. Practice radical empathy. Make a conscious effort to understand the people you disagree with, even those you fear or resent. Recognizing shared humanity is the most powerful antidote to dehumanization. Speak up when it matters. Moral courage means acting even when it's uncomfortable, unpopular, or risky. Silence allows injustice to grow. Final reflection. The line within. The capacity for good and evil resides within every human being. The boundary is not between nations, races, or ideologies. It runs through each of us. The forces that shaped humanity's darkest moments are still active today, in politics, in social media, and in everyday interactions. The real question is not whether evil exists in the world, but whether we are vigilant enough to recognize its early signs within ourselves. Now that you understand the process, how cruelty is normalized, how self-justification blinds us, and how dehumanization enables violence, what will you do differently? In a world full of noise, choose thought. At Deep Thinker, we look beyond the surface. Like, subscribe, and think with us, deeply, consciously, fearlessly.